ADHD Rewired, episode
397.
This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We have our monthly live Q&A today. We are recording this on September 14th. I almost forgot what month it is. And we are here with all of our usual panelists. We got MJ, Roxie, Will, Moira, Brendan, and of course, Barb. So I'm just going to give each one of those people a chance to just say hello quickly. MJ, starting with you. MJ from ADHD Diversified.
Hi, everybody.
And we got Roxie Martin, Coach Roxie Martin from the soon eventually to be launched podcast. Wait, what was the question?
Hi, everybody.
And we got Will Curb of Hacking Your ADHD and co-host of the soon to be launched podcast. Wait, what was the question?
Good to be here.
And we got Moira Maybin, Coach Moira Maybin, and the host of the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle.
Hello.
Hello. And we got Brendan Mahan, Coach and host of ADHD Essentials.
Hi, everybody.
All right. And today, and Barb.
Hello.
Hey, Barb. All right. So Barb's going to be helping us field the questions and may even chime in. So we got Hamea, who has a question about organizing. So let me get you unmuted here. There you go. All right, Hamea, what is your question?
Yes, my question to the panel is how are you organizing your files? Can you give some hot tips for what, maybe explain what hasn't worked for you and then what has worked for you and why? It's like my files are a hot mess. I have a million of them. When I move, I have about 50 boxes, all of files, and I don't want that to continue. It's like, talk about spaghetti on the wall. It's just crazy. So anything you can do to help, I would appreciate it. And I'm assuming I can probably take a lot of tips from you as well as translate the paper files to the digital files. But if you have specific tips for that too, that'd be great.
Okay. It looks like MJ was excited to jump on this one.
Oh, no, I was thinking digital files because I have a couple of things for that too. But if it's physical files, that's a hard one. But so I'm an administrator for an office and the filing there is ridiculous. The only thing that we are really consistent with that does help because we have client folders is just keep things in alphabetical order.
Yeah.
That is very helpful. And label your filing cabinets and label the boxes and label the things that are in storage, because going back to find accounting things from 3 years ago when they're not labeled is a lot of fun. So labels.
And on the labels too, use the, instead of saying, Dr. John, right? Say dentist, if Dr. John is the dentist. For be more broad with your labels. So you have to try to think about like categories versus specifics. It's a really funny question that you started with this, because I have had 2 growing baskets of papers that I'm going to deal with later that started in January that I just started going through yesterday. And so right now on the counter of my kitchen, it is completely covered in organized piles. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, you know what? This is not working for me. What has worked for me is I have a scanner app on my phone. I hate paper, right? Like I like paper, but I hate paper because all these things where I'm like, I don't know if I should keep this. Like Most of the things I don't actually need to keep. The app that I use is called Cam Scanner. And I do use it's for iOS. It is I do have the pro version of it, and it just works really well. I just like it. So that's sort of a tip. And then think about accessibility, right? Like, so I have my file cabinet upstairs in a room where if I was really wanting to maintain a file system, I would probably have it where I open my mail. All right. So decreasing the steps to get there. All right. Will, what do you got?
So, thinking about this, because I've also just gone through my paper monster, and mine was like a couple years old, been like, oh, I should do this. And then I'm like going through being like, why do I even have this stuff? I haven't needed any of this in like 2 years. And yes, there's certainly files that are important, old tax returns, that kind of thing. You want to have that physical backup, but really questioning, okay, what would be the purpose of me keeping this other than just, I keep these things. Why wouldn't I? But really think, oh, okay, do I really need to keep this? Or is this something where I'm keeping it because that's what I do? And then to go along with like then the organizational system, there's 2 trees you really want to look at. So you want to have, as Eric was saying, like that broad, more categorized, like, okay, this is, things from this, these are my doctor things. These are my, that makes it a lot easier to sort rather than being like, this is from this specific doctor and this is from this specific doctor. And then also really trying to think about organizing by year, because that's often more likely how we're going to look for things is when something happened rather than exactly what it is.
Moira? Unmute?
Just learning how to unmute.
Uh-huh.
First day. So it's been pointing out to me, I'm a bit of a unicorn when it comes in ADHD, because organization and planning was something that I was trying to be a perfectionist. So I put a lot of time into this. There's little things like if you're using file folders, write on pencil, use pencil so that when you change your mind of what you want it to be, you can reuse it easily. And you're not like, especially if you have visual stuff, you can have those bigger drop folders and do like one and label it utilities and one taxes. And then you have the folders inside of that. I've actually, with utilities and bills, I've pretty much gone digital with those, because then the paper keeps coming.
I've done that too.
Like you said, I have a recycling bin and a shredder right beside where our mail comes in, because you can deal with 90% of the paper that way. If it's something that's got your name or address on it, you just tear that part off the piece of paper. And we have actually my son's job was to do the shredding and deal with stuff like that right away. But I also had, I just got rid of teaching stuff that I've had for 25 years that I've never used. I'm finding it kind of goes into 2 categories of stuff you're interested in and stuff you're not interested in. And the stuff that I was interested in, I actually took away by myself a week or so ago and had a weekend away. And I went through it and really just switched it over to digital stuff. So I have a to read folder on my computer now, because that stuff just keeps piling up and piling up and piling up. And one of the things I learned from the coaching and accountability group was to have a weekly time to go through. So one of my in trays is papers that don't need any action, that I just need to deal with. And then one of them is stuff I need to do stuff with. And each week I deal with that.
It's funny you said to write in pencil. And like for me, my brain doesn't register things written in pencil, especially if it's on like a colored card. So I use a label maker. I love using a label maker because it just it makes my brain happy.
They're amazing. I know. I even put them on food in the freezer.
Bar, what about you?
Actually, I was just going to go along the lines of what Will was saying. We had a file cabinet, 2 of them. And I had to step back and say, why am I saving all these paid doctor's bills, So now, and then I changed the way I do things is I shred as soon as I pay for it, because I have a record.
Nice.
And I don't need the paper, but that's something you have to look at your system. But we got rid of a lot.
Yeah, that's great. Roxie?
I wrote down notes, and this is my planning philosophy. Common sense is relative. So I don't plan
according to common sense because it changes. It can make perfect sense depending on where I am. And then I come back later and I'm like, no, I have common sense, but it's completely different than that common sense. So I don't plan using that. The broader the buckets, the better it is for me. Like what you said, Eric, I will get in the weeds if I try to get too detailed and too specific. So I seriously limit my buckets to 4 initially so that I can keep moving forward on what I'm doing. If I can't make a quick decision on which bucket it goes into, I have a perfectionism pile and I just put it over there and I don't deal with it because it'll slow me down when I'm in the mood. And it doesn't come often that I'm actually in the mood to do this. So that's a thing. And then what else? The same thing that Moira said, just the POP, like the point of performance. The more that I can do right where I am, right where it comes in, the better. So I too have the trash can by where the mail comes and anything I can do to make it really simple. And I only have one catch-all. I need to see it or it doesn't exist. So I have a clear bin, all my shit goes in the clear bin, and then I pull it out and do the buckets. And then last thing, I've mentioned this before, but for digital organization, I really like the PARA method by Tiago Forte because it's 4 buckets. And so for me, it works because the buckets are really simple. I don't have a good long working memory, so that's effective for me. And it's just projects. Oh, see, as soon as I start talking to you guys, I get nervous that I'm going to forget and then I lose it.
I always do that.
So I like actually pulled it up and then I have so many stinking windows that it's like not here, but it's really simple. I promise. And the first one's projects. The next one, I'm not going to be able to tell you right now. The third one is resources. And the fourth one is archives. And honestly, just having those 4 buckets helps my brain to relax and know that I'm going to be okay and I'm going to figure out where things go.
Nice. Brendan, and then we'll go on to our next question.
The recycling bin is a file.
Yes.
So when you're filing, think of the recycling bin as a file as opposed to something separate and different, because then you won't recycle stuff. You'll just have a pile of things that you want to recycle later. Whatever filing system you have, don't close it. Like if you have a filing cabinet or something and you're going to be filing, don't first thing you want to do is open that drawer if you have a drawer, because otherwise you're just going to put everything on top of whatever is not open. And that's a whole different problem, right?
And they do sell open face.
They do.
File cabinets. So not in a cabinet, but it's like the hanging files that can hold, I don't know, a couple dozen file folders. And that could be a really good option too.
And then digitally, if you have certain files that you deal with fairly regularly, like, I don't know, a blog or something, use the letter Z. Like my blog stuff and my podcast ideas are just Z and then the word podcast, or Z and then the word blog. Because then when I go to search for it, I can just type in Z blog and all of those will come up for me.
It's a cool trick.
So half of organization digitally is making the search easier as opposed to making the files more organized.
That's great. That's great. All right. Hami, I hope that was helpful for you. Let's go on to our next question.
The next question is from Jane. If someone's been self-medicating with caffeine and nicotine for a long time, do you think the ADHD assessor needs to assess you from baseline without any self-meds?
Well, I think that if you're coming in and you've been doing it for a long time, that kind of is your baseline. Roxie? I'm getting all these nonverbal signals going, no, I'm not sure what's happening. MJ?
Yeah, so when I got assessed, I let the social worker at the time that I was working with let them know that I was like a heavy smoker and a heavy caffeine drinker. Like I used to smoke 2 packs a day. Like it was a lot. And I had started very young, and I was just, for a long time, I was like, oh, I just have an addictive personality. And I didn't get diagnosed up until a couple of years ago. And she was like, oh, okay. And how much coffee do you drink? I'm like, why are you asking me that? And it was also a not particularly healthy amount. So between that and the smoking and just sort of my rambly behavior at the time, because I just had no idea that it was ADHD, that was sort of okay, so you've been self-medicating for a very long time. And I didn't understand what that meant until I actually got the diagnosis. And then when I started meds, then that stuff reduced significantly. So that was an interesting baseline that she approached that from.
So here's a sort of a fun fact about smoking and ADHD, that they've discovered that nicotine may actually help improve ADHD symptoms. So the pharmaceutical companies right now are looking at medications that target the nicotine receptors without all the other cancerous agents that come from smoking cigarettes. So yeah, I mean and who knows? Who knows? Is it just like you're taking breaks more, so your brain's like refreshed? I mean, I used to be a smoker too, so but it is interesting that people do often self-report that when they were smoking, that they felt like their ADHD symptoms were not as bad for after they quit. Um, but if you are thinking about quitting smoking, I want to just applaud the effort. It is a real, I mean, I think I've probably tried quitting 40 times before I actually quit. This was something about 15 years ago. And what actually helped me quit was my doctor said to me, he actually prescribed me Wellbutrin, which is the otherwise marketed as Zyban, which is a smoking cessation medication. And he said, take this for 2 months. Don't do anything different. I was like, okay, that works for me. I can keep smoking, taking this medication. And then 2 months later, I started cutting down, and I ended up quitting from that. It was not as difficult to quit. But I'll tell you this, like, I think while it's really hard to quit, I think the first year is like the hardest, because it's like every one of those triggers is like, oh, I'm in the car. Oh, it's a nice day. Oh, I'm going to a concert. Oh, I'm stressed. Oh, like all those triggers. And it just takes time. Right. So I just want to speak to that. So, all right. Let's go to our next question.
All right. We actually have Michaela. I'm going to bring her up, or him or her, not sure. And
Michaela.
Michaela, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Michaela.
Hi.
What's your question?
So my question is about building long-term habits. It's something I've read a lot about. I read BJ Fogg's book. There's another one I read through. So I really seem to understand how to do it, but then keeping it long-term is really difficult. So I'll get started with something, stick with it for maybe 2 to 6 weeks, and depending on what it is, at one point, I just wake up and forget I was ever trying to do that in the first place. So I was wondering if you might have some advice for keeping those long-term.
Sure. Couple things. When you're trying a new habit, one of the things I like to do is to throw questions to myself in the calendar. So if you know that your tendency to maybe drop off something is 4 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, throw a question in your calendar that asks you, hey, are you still doing, whatever the habit is that you're working on? By doing that, it sort of creates this sort of safety net into the future, where it sort of catches us, hopefully at kind of just the right time. I know for one of the things that I have learned over the years is that when we change anything in our routine or our environment, like it can just completely derail the strongest built habits. One specifically would be exercise. So, exercise has been one of the big ways that I manage my ADHD. And overall, the last, I don't know, decade, I've been on a pretty good exercise routine with here and there, I'd kind of putter out for a little bit. But one of the things that I discovered early on is that when I would go to a conference, for example, or I'd be out of town or something like that, like it derailed my exercise routine like completely. So one of the things that I did was anytime I travel, I make sure that I work out. I always also make sure I work out the day I come back from traveling to just get back into that routine. I remember even when I moved my house a couple of years ago, I was actually really concerned about not maintaining the workout. So even though I was like dead tired from the move, the first thing I did that morning of getting up was going and working out, to really build that habit in the environment. And just, creating cues, having accountability can also be really helpful. Having someone to do the thing with who can ask you about, like, hey, how you doing with the eating healthy, or how you doing with exercise or the drinking water. So I think it's also really helpful to have those cues. Brendan.
Also booking it, right? Like I got to get back on that exercise bandwagon. It's in my calendar
Nice.
as of this week. It's just like, this is what you're doing. The first thing in the morning is you're exercising. And then the other thing that helps me with specifically the challenge that you're talking about, Michaela, around I kind of do it for a little while and then it goes away, is I try to stay mindful of the fact that there's this gap between new and interesting and habit.
Yeah.
And when we hit that gap, it's just a slog. Like it's easy to do the thing when it's new and interesting and the ADHD brain is like, wee, this is fun. And then it isn't new and interesting anymore, right? And that might take 3 days, that might take 3 weeks. And then you're like, oh, this is literally the worst. Like, why did I decide to do this thing? But if you just try to keep in mind, and it works for me. If I just try to keep in mind that, yeah, this is supposed to suck. That's why I'm trying to make it a habit. If it was easy to do, I wouldn't want to make it a habit. I would just be doing it. So keeping in mind that there's a gap, it can be helpful.
Will?
And just to piggyback off of Brendan there, we are always going to hit that slog in everything we do. So one of the ways to like pre-commit is to actually decide what would make you quit. Because if you know when you're going to quit, then you go, okay, I'm not there yet. I still have reasons to keep going. So having that pre-commitment of, oh, okay, I'm not going to quit until X happens. Okay, X hasn't happened yet. I'm still going.
Yeah, and I think, I have found to be one of the most powerful parts to strengthen a habit is not missing a day. It's getting back up the next day. It actually creates, I think, one of the strongest things that we can do to actually strengthen the behavior as a habit. Like in our coaching groups, one of the things we work on is we use this behavioral sort of tracking tool for planning. And one of the goals is to do 5-day streaks. And the reason we just cap at 5 days, it's because like streaks can be so like dismotivating. If you have a long streak and you break your streak, right? It's like, oh man. But if you're only doing 5-day streaks at a time, like you miss a day, all right, just get back up. That's the most important thing, is to get back up. Like I say in our groups is put on your rubber pants and bounce back up. Is that helpful for you?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything new that anyone wants to add to that? Moira.
Hormonal cycles.
Of course.
We're not this. If you have ovaries and if you have, or, you're having a hormonal cycle, our energy is not the same over the month. Our desires, our motivations, and we've been sort of led to believe that how we are the first 2 weeks of our cycle is, or actually 2 and 3, is how we should be the entire time. And we're not. So taking that information and then what everybody else has said, making it as easy to restart as possible. So if I'm running and I don't feel like running because I got my period, can I go for a walk? Can I wander around my yard? Just something, just put on the workout clothes that you can go, okay, I did something along this. Because what you want to do is like create a piece of paper where we make a fold. It's harder the first time. And the more we fold it, the easier it gets. And so that's what all the things we're talking about is trying to do, is just to make it easier so that it becomes more of a default.
Okay. I had another thought about something that you were just saying. And so exercise. If you fall out of if you were doing good like on an exercise routine and you slip for, I don't know, a week, a month, a couple of years, right? Like even if you were like, let's say you ran a couple marathons, but you haven't gotten off your couch in 2 months, start by walking to the mailbox, then down the block, then maybe jog to the mailbox, then down the block, then increase, like literally start really small and incrementally increase. This is, I don't know, maybe I get in my soapbox about this with exercise in particular, because people are like, oh, hey, I finally made it to the gym after 5 years of avoiding it. Now I'm going to work out for an hour. Don't do that. If your body gets sore after working out, your brain is absolutely going to remember that. And then you're going to wonder, why do I feel so resistant now that I feel the motivation? I want to work out again, but I can't get myself to do it. It's because your brain remembered the pain that you made yourself sore. So whether you miss a week, a month, a year, just start back with where you are at and get back to it.
Also related to that, schedule transition time between those first workouts and whatever it is that you need to do next. Because if your butt is kicked by that workout and then you have to jump into a meeting or, I don't know, enter data into a spreadsheet or something, that's going to be really challenging when you're sucking wind and sweating through your dress shirt. So,
right. And, when we are building habits and when we are building routines, initially it actually will cost sort of more executive function energy. But the payoff is it then offloads it from something that our sort of executive part of our brain is responsible for and moves it more to automaticity, right? And it takes as long as it takes. And unfortunately, the bond that it creates in our environment, it's weak, right? So we just have to be mindful of that and be ready to get back up. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I know we have a bunch more questions to answer. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our coaching community. We've already started the 26th season of our award-winning online coaching and accountability groups, which means we are already adding people to our winter interest list. If you're wondering what group coaching with accountability can do for you, then you're in the right place. Learn more by heading over to coachingrewired.com. If you want to get your name added to our winter interest list, you can click the bluish periwinkle button at the top of the page to add your name. This will be the first for ADHD Rewired because we are having our kickoff event on a Saturday, October 30th. If that works for you, that website again is coachingrewired.com, where you can learn more about our 10-week program for adults with ADHD, created by adults with ADHD. If there's one thing I can promise at the end of the 10 weeks, it's that we will all still have ADHD. I have ADHD, Moira and Roxie, our other wonderful ADHD Rewired coaches, have ADHD, our peer mentors and our alum, and the wonderful Barb. We all have ADHD. While the program may be 10 weeks, the support doesn't stop there. Because as one of our Rockstar alumni members would say, maintenance is next level shit. Don't wait. Discover what our coaching groups are all about and get your questions answered and add your name to our winter interest list by going to coachingrewired.com. Registration is by invitation only, and you do need to have your name on that list to get invited. So stay up to date when our registration events are by going to coachingrewired.com, because it never is too late to start planning ahead. That's coachingrewired.com. Support for this podcast comes from Adult Study Hall by ADHD Rewired at adultstudyhall.com. It's the ADHD-friendly co-working community, just like I say in the intro of this show, for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. Discover the power of real-time accountability that's shame-free and judgment-free, working with other adults with ADHD who just get it. When you become a member, you'll gain access to our on-demand drop-in room called ASH, which stands for Adult Study Hall, ASH 24/7. That's available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This includes those late nights, the weekends, which means no matter what time zone you are in, ASH 24/7 will be there for you. If you're looking for some more structure, your membership also includes our facilitated sessions, part of our weekly ASH Plus events. Find your focus by joining ASH Plus sessions, where we cover themes like cleaning and decluttering, taskbuster sessions for those dreaded to-dos, workout sessions, job and career accelerator sessions, a Write With Me session, and more ASH Plus sessions are coming soon. And once a month, and it's happening this week, I am hosting a Pomodoro dance party this Thursday, October 14th at 2:30 p.m. Central. That's 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, where we will work for 25 minutes, then get our bodies moving with 5 minutes of dancing. We will repeat that 4 times. Go to adultstudyhall.com to sign up and to learn more about all of our ASH Plus events. And if you haven't joined us yet, what are you waiting for? Membership is only $19.99 a month, and you can try it free for your first week. Grab your to-dos and join the ADHD-friendly virtual co-working community built just for us. It really does make a difference when you're working with people who just get it. So why join something like FocusMate when you can join Adult Study Hall, the community built just for us, adults with ADHD. go to adultstudyhall.com and check it out. We'll see you there.
We are back to the September live Q&A.
Nice. All right. You're a pro, Barb. Who do we got for with our next question?
Actually, Kevin has a question. When you all talk about getting things done, it always sounds like everyone is better at planning and following a system than me. Even getting accountability help is not consistent. How do you get things done when there's no consistent pattern of productivity?
Well, first of all, if you think that I am on my planning game all the time, let me let me burst the bubble, because I'm not. It is something that I have really good streaks, and I'm kicking ass with it. And then there's times where it's like, what tool was I even using to put my to-dos? Right? Like I literally like wax away in between those two realities. I think that one of the most important things is to recognize like where the stuck is, talk to someone else about it. And don't struggle alone, right? Just sharing that you're struggling, just sharing that you're having a hard time with your planning could be so helpful if that is received by someone who can hear that and support you without shaming you in any way. Moira?
I shared a group that often my day planner on Thursday and Friday is completely blank because I haven't cracked it open. I have holders for stuff, so I don't, right? Otherwise I'd get anxious. But yeah, it's definitely an ebb and flow. Will did an excellent episode this week, planning your day. And it was very helpful. So there's that.
Before the break, we were talking about, with exercise, like even if you were running a marathon, if you've been on the couch for a while, you got to start back at square one. Planning is the same way, right? So when I do my yearly planning, right, the idea is that my yearly plans influence my monthly goals. My monthly goals so help me inform what I'm doing for the week. What I'm doing for the week, like help me figure out what I'm doing for the day. When I am on top of my stuff and am like checking in on all that stuff very regularly, I can plan my day and my week in a couple minutes. If it's been a while since I looked at my plan, it's about a 20-minute process to plan my day, right? And actually yesterday, a couple of days ago, because I've been kind of struggling a little bit with my planning, because I realized I have maybe a couple too many things going on that I'm trying to offload right now. And so what I actually started doing is I keep my yearly goals up on my screen. I'm actually using I look at my yearly goals as part of my daily planning, which I have not done before. I usually would do that with my monthly planning. So right now I'm kind of just experimenting. And this is part of the process that we should always be doing, is always be experimenting if something is not working, right? Because we will discover new things and they actually might work, at least for a while. Brendan?
I am fully fallen off the planning wagon. I can't see the planning wagon. I still have bruises from where it ran me over. Because of the nature of how I handled COVID, right? Like homeschooling my kids, trying to run a business at the same time. Now my kids are in school, y'all, like they're in public school. And I don't know. I don't have the ability to plan right now because what I need to do instead is prioritize. I can't plan until after I prioritize stuff. But I'm still finding it difficult because I just live and this is probably pertinent to this question. I just spent the last year and a half in survival mode. I was going from urgency to urgency all the time because I was stretched way too thin with all the stuff I was trying to do. And I understandably so, which is kind of the nature of where I was. Now that I don't have to be in survival mode anymore, my brain is wired for survival mode and I have to ADHD rewire it so that I can get back into the planning and prioritizing stuff and all of those things that I know how to do, but I'm not doing a good job executing on yet. So that might be hiding somewhere in this question where are you? And maybe you don't need to plan yet. Maybe you need to prioritize and figure out what's important.
Well, and Brendan, and I know that I had not seen you in our Tuesday alumni planning sessions in probably maybe 2 years. And the last 2 weeks, it's been a pleasure seeing you back.
Yeah, I'm trying. Trying to get back in the cart. I'm just running and hoping I can find it.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It just keep coming back to it.
Right. Yeah.
So I hope that helps. And it's just, look, planning when you have ADHD is hard. Like if it were easy, like half of the things we talk about wouldn't be around planning and time management. Our brain just doesn't do that so well, right? But we can get better at it. All right.
Also, I'm gonna jump in real quick because I just like alluded to something, but I didn't come out and say it, and it wouldn't be an episode of this Q&A if I don't say it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lived through a global pandemic. We are experiencing a worldwide trauma event. Give yourself a break.
Indeed.
It's okay.
And I also think that I know it's premature to say, as we're coming out of this, as we come out of this eventually at some point in the who knows when, it would not be surprising to feel like you're becoming a little unhinged when things are starting to go back to the way they were. Because it's something about like when the stressor is no longer present, you start to and you start to actually breathe and sigh like, oh, okay, that's over. Like your brain kind of goes into like, it has this realization of how long it's been in survival mode for. And it kind of wants to take a nap because it's kind of done working so hard.
That is where I am.
Yeah. And it's okay to let it. Okay. Next question.
The next question comes from Ritika, and she's asking when she starts organizing stuff and decluttering, it's very hard to shake off the lingering feeling that I'm forgetting something or that I could do it better. Is this a weird sense of perfectionism that comes back to bite me in the butt? What's a good way to handle this?
Okay. So I kind of love this question. So this weird feeling that you're forgetting something or that you can do it better. Yeah, you're probably forgetting something. Could probably do it better, but you don't need to. It is good enough. Because I think if we really think about how like that neurotic perfectionism, that's what it is. And I kind of want for us to be using those two words together because I think that people still sometimes will use like, oh, I'm a perfectionist, like a badge of honor. I'm like, no, perfectionism is crazy making. It's crazy making. When we could do something at like 80% quality and we did it in an hour, but we spend 10 hours trying to make it 100% quality, like that is not a good deal, right? Go for 80% every single time. And just so you know, your 80% is going to feel probably like 40%. And so you have to try to learn how
called
to.
out right now.
What's that?
I feel so called out right now.
So what do you mean, MJ? Is where are you struggling with some of your perfectionism?
Oh, why did I talk? Well, say for editing this podcast, it is, and I enjoy doing it, but it is very easy for me to fall into perfectionism mode of spending unnecessary time looking for a royalty-free song that will go into the background of an ad. Like that is just so unbelievably unnecessary. And so I have to reach out to somebody to be like, I am doing this and I'm not going to be doing this now. Just doing that helps. And sort of having that practice of done is better than perfect. It's one of those sort of brain muscles that needs to be worked and it gets easier over time. But for me, it's been over a very long period of time. I'm self-proclaimed perfectionist in recovery.
Me too. Roxie?
I was just looking at the question again and just thinking about expectations. And something that has been helpful for me is to think about what expectation can I have that has the most likelihood of me ending the thing with a feeling of like success or accomplishment. And for me, it usually means reducing my expectations significantly. So if my goal is to declutter my kitchen, I'm not going to go in and go, my goal is to declutter my entire kitchen. I'm going to go in and go, my goal is to declutter the left-hand counter. And then I feel really good and I'm not beating myself up and I'm not so caught in perfectionism or wondering what I didn't accomplish because literally it's like right in front of me. So anything you might be able to think of that would make your expectations really easy to meet and accomplish, I'd say that might be a nice place to start.
And just the idea that good, like if your brain has convinced you that working on it more is going to be better and that it's got to be perfect, right? Sometimes our brain lies to us, right? It's not meaning to, but it gets confused. So truly that part of like rewiring our brain is you have it sort of at this trigger that creates this thought and feeling behind it, right? It's like, oh, like I'm organizing, I'm feeling anxious, oh, I need to keep going, right? So how do you change that response loop, right? So how do you go from to change from, oh, I got to do more, it's got to be perfect, to, oh, good enough is great. Like how can you do it, say, perfectly in 20 minutes? And by the way, the word perfect used to mean right for the situation. And it somehow in the last, I don't know, 50, 60 years, it has gotten bastardized to mean without flaw. So we can either take back the old meaning of perfect, right for the situation, because most situations don't require anything to be done without flaws. Okay. Barb?
All right, we're going to have Kelly ask her question.
Hello, Kelly.
Hello.
Hi.
So I have deadlines pretty much like until the rest of the month, like every day. And I'm frozen. I can't prioritize. I can't make sense of the stuff that I need to work on, even though I do it every day. I'm training somebody to be my partner in this position so that I can not be so overwhelmed with work all the time. And I don't know what to do. I'm wondering what you guys, when you're completely like paralyzed from the overwhelm. I always tell myself baby steps, but it's not working for me right now.
Okay, this is something I am very, very, very familiar with. Um, so a while back, I wrote something called the ADHD productivity sleep cycle. So this is where we stay up late to finish work. We went to bed too late. We only got maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep, which caused us to be very inefficient the next day. So then we end up staying up late to finish work. Rinse and repeat. I find that when I am struggling with planning and getting overwhelmed, staying up later to finish the work is actually the least productive thing I could be doing. Right? Planning is hard on a sleep deprived brain
Mhm.
to know what you have to do. Right. So first thing, I think sharing kind of just like right now, like sharing with other people. I know when I am overwhelmed and I feel just paralyzed by all the things I got going on, I am very much of a verbal processor. I need to talk it out. Often when I'm talking it out, I actually discover what I need to do just through that process, which is really helpful. Sometimes I still don't know. So having somebody else to ask questions can be really, really helpful. Do you have anyone that can ask you questions about kind of what you got going on, and you can share what you feel stuck on?
I work from home, so all my coworkers are also, virtual, and I think I've chatted them, the ones that I could chat with, to death. Um, I'm a distraction to my team,
Do you
and
know that, or are you just assuming that?
I know that.
How?
I found out that I'm the only person on my team that actually has the time to speak to others during the day, unless it's specifically like, customer related. Like I do all my stuff during the day, like make my, appointments and stuff, because I can multitask. My job isn't quite that intensive.
Kelly, I just want to say that if the place that you're working for, if you are actually the only one doing that, you work for a very weird organization. Because I promise you, everyone who's working remote is doing
Yeah.
that.
And
They just might not be admitting it.
oh, okay. So okay. But literally though, I'm the only one doing this job. Like no one else knows how to do it. And my boss only, I've been here, it'll almost be a year next month, but my boss just realized my workload in April. And I have a partner now, and they're hiring for me starting next week. But I have to get all the stuff, all the training materials, everything, like, and I have a meeting with him tomorrow at like 11 a.m. to go through the training plan.
So in our coaching groups, we use the book The One Thing, and has the what we call the focusing question. And the focusing question asks, what's the one thing that you could do such by doing it would make everything else easier
Mhm.
or necessary? So if you think about the things that you have a deadline for, what's the one thing you could do such by doing it would make figuring out the next action step easier or necessary?
I don't know.
Imagine you did.
Okay.
What would that be?
Okay. I think so. The thing I gotta train her on is like basic order entry. That's the first thing out of the door that she has to learn,
Okay.
so that I can focus on other stuff except for orders.
Okay. So what's the one thing you can do such by doing it would make training her on basic order entry easier or necessary?
I think if what you were saying earlier about talking things out, so many times I have problems where I'm like, hey, help me, coworker, chatting with them. And halfway through my second sentence, I'm like, wait a minute, I just figured it out. I answered my own question just by thinking about it. So I get that. And I feel like if I go to my orders, which is my primary job, then I can coordinate creating a training document at the same time as I'm doing the orders. So the stuff that is, tricky or whatever, I can pop that into a note, like into an outline format.
Have you ever created training documents before?
I used to at my old job, and I used to like for this artist collective I worked with. I was managing editor of an online magazine. And everything just blew up, and I'm like, I can't do anything. I can't make to-do lists.
Have you ever used any kind of screencasting software where you can literally like talk through what you're doing as you're doing it?
Yeah.
So that's how Barb and I often do, sort of document a lot of the things that we do. And then we go through, after recording it, we go through and sort of put down the steps in Asana and then kind of redo that thing to make sure that what we built, it was accurate. It doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to be functional.
You said Asana?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's a task management software. And there's lots of ones that do pretty similar things.
Okay.
Okay. So what's your first step? What are you going to do?
First step is I'm going to go and do my job.
That's very vague. That to me, I imagine, all right, I'm going to go sit at my computer and now search the entire internet.
I'm going to go enter some orders and open a Word document to start taking notes.
Okay. What are you not going to do?
Is this a trick question?
Nope.
I'm not going to, oh my God, I don't know.
Imagine yourself sitting at your computer, getting ready to work. When you feel that paralysis, what does it feel like?
Oh God. It's like it's my stomach. It's everywhere.
Okay. So that's your cue. How are you going to respond differently?
I'm going to fight through it and tell myself I can do this.
Okay. Also, drink some water.
Oh, yeah.
It is a simple, really effective strategy that tells our brain we're not actually under attack.
Okay.
Okay. Just one thing at a time. Reach out. Kelly, you got this.
Okay. Thank you.
You are welcome. All right. We're going to take one more quick break. And when we come back, we will answer some more of your questions. So we will be right back. If you are listening to this podcast ad, but really wish you didn't have to, there's an option for you. You can get access to ad-free episodes of this show when you become a patron at the $5 a month level. Go to adhdrewired.com/Patreon. That's just about $1 an episode. The website again is adhdrewired.com/Patreon. $5 a month gets you ad-free episodes. Then at $10 a month, that gives you a bonus audio track every month on that special podcast feed. On the fourth Tuesday of every month, for our $25 a month patrons, I host a coaching session on Zoom, and we drop the audio recording of that coaching session right into the ad-free podcast feed. Sign up for it over at adhdrewired.com/Patreon. Perks for our patrons start at just $5 a month with ad-free episodes, and support can start at any amount that suits you. No matter the contribution, I'm grateful for any contribution you're able to give. It costs around $700 a month for editing alone. So while podcasts are free to you, the listener, they are not free to produce. So thank you to all of our patrons, new and old, for supporting this show. And if it's not in the cards for you right now and you are still here tuning in every week, I want you to know how grateful I am for you just tuning in. So if you love the show and want to support what we're doing here at ADHD Rewired, then head on over to adhdrewired.com/Patreon and become a patron. Perks start at just $5 a month, and support can start at any amount. That's adhdrewired.com/Patreon. And if you've been meaning to do it for a while, what can you do right now that would be a helpful reminder for you later when you're able to do it? Or what if you just took 1 minute right now? Because it only takes about 1 minute to sign up to become a patron. That's adhdrewired.com/Patreon. That's PATREON. And thank you so much. It's the second Tuesday of the month, which means you can join me and the entire ADHD Rewired podcast network family for an hour of live Q&A. Join me and Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials, Will Curb from Hacking Your ADHD, MJ from ADHD Diversified, Coach Moira Maybin from the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle, and Coach Roxie Martin from our upcoming show, co-hosted with Will Curb. Wait, what was the question? Oh, and Barb will be there too. We do this every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. You can register for today's and future Q&As at adhdrewired.com/events. While you're there, check out all of our other podcasts or go directly to adhdrewired.com/podcast network. You know, it's ADHD Awareness Month, and one of the things that you can do to spread awareness about ADHD and ADHD related content is to share this podcast with someone you know, or leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And if you've been meaning to do that for a while, I could really use some fresh reviews. Doing that actually helps other people find this podcast. We hope to see you at an upcoming live Q&A. Go to adhdrewired.com, click on the events tab to register, and click on podcasts to see all of our other podcasts. You'll find all of that at adhdrewired.com. October is ADHD Awareness Month, and there's no shortage of ADHD events happening this month. We don't just get a day or a week, we actually get a whole month. If you haven't heard already, the International Conference on ADHD is coming to your home or office, and it's just a few weeks away. It's November 4th through 6th, and thanks to COVID, it's going to be virtual again this year. So you won't have to spend money on airfare or cabs or accommodations and all that other typically not ADHD-friendly stuff. For this online conference, I will be speaking about how to make accountability work. To register, go to adhdrewired.com/ADHDCon. That's ADHDCON, all one word. I was able to get listeners of this show a pretty sweet discount as well. Also, I need to make a correction. I think last week I said that that discount is 25%. My apologies. It's 15%, which is still a pretty nice discount. This incredible conference is yours at 15% off when you go to adhdrewired.com/ADHDCon. When you go to adhdrewired.com/ADHDCon, you'll be redirected to the conference page, and that discount will already be applied. Easy, right? I think with the discount, I figured out it was like $127 if you're not doing the pre-conference institute. It's a great deal. It's a great conference. I hope to see you there. That's adhdrewired.com/ADHDCon. And happy ADHD Awareness Month.
And we're back.
And Louise is going to ask her question live.
All right, Louise, what is your question?
I'm getting tested for ADHD, and a while back I was like, I have it, I think, so I'm just gonna teach myself how to deal with it. Then Moira at one point convinced me that that's not the way to go, so you should get it tested. But now I'm like scared maybe that they're gonna tell me I don't have it. Or maybe they're gonna say I do have it, and then I don't know how to deal with that. Also, if I'm going there to get tested, which is in the Netherlands, it's gonna be different from in America. But what can I expect, and how to prepare?
I mean, it's an ADHD evaluation. Does anyone prepare for it?
I don't know.
Can I share quick? So Hi, Louise. I'm also a fellow Irish citizen. But yep. So I had a neuropsych, which is not what you need for an ADHD diagnosis, but I had that, I don't know, sometime after my diagnosis due to my brain injury. I was medicated, and there was this task I had to do where I had to like pay attention and like notice things on lines. And I was like doing it, and I was trying really hard. And then all of a sudden I was thinking about the book I was reading. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I got to pay attention. And then I was like doing it again. And then I was like, God, this would be so boring to mark. And then I was like, oh, how do they mark it? And then I was thinking about how I was going to tell the examiner this. So I think like where Eric was going is if you have ADHD and they're a good assessor of ADHD in women, you don't really have much to worry about because it's oftentimes it's more about ruling out other things.
I love the way you just described that, Moira. I did there was one of it was not a continuous performance test that I forget what it was called, the quotient test, which is a part of an assessment tool that can be used to like titrate medication. It's basically this like super boring test where there's 5 different stars that are going to flash and you have to hit the space bar only on the 5-sided star. And it's a 20-minute test. Literally, it was like, all right, I'm just going to use my self-talk strategies. Well, after about 5 minutes of saying the same phrase to yourself over and over again, it sort of just becomes this like droning thought that then morphs into things that may or may not even be words. And then you're like, wait a minute, how long was I out for? And it shows it on the assessment of just like, there's a 20-minute thing too. Like there was 2 minutes where it was like, were you paying attention at all? And it was like, oh God. So yeah, I mean, the gold standard for an assessment is a couple rating scales. Shared with a loved one, if that's an option. If you have access to any of your educational records, and that clinical interview, that conversation. So much for a good diagnostician, it's not just based on the rating scales. It's also in the qualitative piece, even like how you communicate. Like I have noticed with a lot of people with ADHD have a certain kind of speech pattern. There's a lot of like starting over and like jumping back into the middle, and like the thoughts are never really quite linear, right? Anyway, with people with ADHD, like we follow that. Like it just seems like a normal conversation. But I also think that the fear that you mentioned about like being afraid that like what if you don't have ADHD is one of the most normal feelings that people have going into that assessment. And I would just ask people who are in the chat if you can just say like yes, if you agree with that, just so you can actually see that that's a really normal thing. I remember going in for a sleep study a while back, and I was afraid that what if I have a sleep disorder and it's not ADHD? Like, so it's all these kind of weird things kind of happen. You still are who you are, right? And by the way, if you don't agree with your assessment, you can get a second opinion. Barb?
Yes, I just wanted to say when I went for my ADHD evaluation, she came back and she couldn't definitively say it's ADHD. And I was disappointed because I'm like, what else is it? But then I went, and I guess my point is just, if you need to go to maybe another evaluator or ask more questions of that evaluator. I went to my therapist and I said, it's interesting. My husband of 16 years, they didn't give him a survey or ask him questions. And he's like, why don't we go ahead and do that and see what I see? And of course, I was not surprised by anything that my husband filled out, but that was my journey with that, if that helps.
Thanks for sharing that, Barb. Brendan?
Sure.
Circling back to Louise's question about how do you prepare for this kind of an assessment? The assessment is meant to assess you, right? Like that's what these assessments are about. So in the 24 hours prior to this test, I recommend just being the most you that you can possibly be, so that when you go, you're as you as possible. And so the test will be as accurate as possible, because that's important. And if you come back with a diagnosis that's something different, like you're still just defining your sandbox. So maybe it's sleep apnea and it's not ADHD, like all that stuff is okay. Even like if I got tested, I like Eric I feel like he next leveled it with the like self-talk and the, like, I'm going to 5-pointed stars, 5-pointed stars, 5-pointed stars, blah, 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 blah,
Hamburger,
blah, blah, blah,
hamburger.
Right. Like, I don't think I would do that. I think I would sit down and be like, all right, cool. 5-pointed stars. Awesome. And I'd be really aggressive and competitive for a minute because that's how I roll. And then I would lose track of it. But I don't think I would try to use a strategy that I wouldn't use ordinarily in my life because that is cheating, I think. Like, I kind of feel like that's cheating. Am I making any kind of sense?
Yes.
Sure.
I had to do another reading thing for a vision assessment, and I thought it was just about tracking my eyes. So I read it without trying to retain any of the information. And then they asked me questions, and I was like, "You tricked me," right? Because I would have had to do a lot of strategies to try and remember while I was reading. So I think, yeah, somewhere in the middle.
We
Not
believe in
sure
you,
if still
Louise.
hear me, or you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice. I would just say thank you. It's very helpful, especially the part of that everybody have that fear of what if not, because I don't know. I had that. Thank you.
My one recommendation might be maybe just call the place and just confirm that you have the right date, time, and address.
Oh, yeah. I think I will figure that out. I know. I have checked it already. I know where it is.
I mean, to tell you that I've heard more than once the story of I like got the wrong date for my ADHD evaluation and now I can't be seen for another 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I feel like you should
it's-
just get the diagnosis if that happens.
Because apparently that's very regular. Either late or miss
Yes.
it completely.
Well, I'm definitely gonna double check it now. So that's thanks. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your question. All right, let's do one last question here, where I want to pick out a good one.
Lily actually has a question of waiting for an assessment for ADHD at the moment. Is it normal to periodically talk yourself in and out of recognizing your symptoms? Great follow-up question. Any tips for killing the imposter syndrome during the wait? I keep swinging rapidly from you just need to try harder and it's hard for you because of your ADHD symptoms. The anxiety about it makes me delay tasks that will move my assessment on.
I think this is a really good situation for mindfulness, right? Just like noticing all the different thoughts that are happening without judging it, right? Just notice that they're happening like an observer. You ever listen to like NPR? Like, what would the NPR reporter report on your internal dialogue? Like, that's how to sort of mindfully sort of report in a sense on this. Like, oh, there's thinking that I'm not enough. Oh, there's thinking that absolutely I have to. Oh, there's there's going back and forth, right? Versus like over identifying with that, like, oh, I'm not enough, or it's not going to be this, or it's not going to be that. So yeah, it's again, I think it's a really normal part of the process. MJ.
Yeah, because that thought process doesn't sound ADHD at all. Because that was definitely me. And I think a lot of us, when, if we were diagnosed as adults, is, oh, I am, oh, maybe I'm not. And we have these old stories that we tell ourselves and these old narratives that we tell ourselves of, trying to be normal. And I know that when I was going for mine, when my partner had said, it's probably ADHD. And I'm like, no, I'm just an idiot. Like, I'm just lazy. I'm just this. And just going to that and finding out what it was, it didn't stop the ruminating. I think that rumination is normal. I think and to kind of echo what Eric said about sort of the mindfulness stuff is to be able to sit with that and just sort of observe that for what it is, because it is scary going in and we don't know until we get there. And to go in without an expectation might also be helpful.
I would say that I'm not sure that rumination is quote unquote normal. I do want to say that if you do have the tendency to ruminate, it's never about the issue. Like your brain always will find an issue to ruminate about.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like because I remember learning about some exposure-based therapy, and the therapist would be like, we're not talking about the issue you want to talk about, like, because it's not the issue. The issue is not the issue. It's the fact that you're ruminating and obsessing about it. So therefore, we want to address the feelings behind the issue and sitting with that versus your desire to talk it over and look at every angle of that scenario, because that is absolutely not what the issue is. So that's something to sort of keep in mind too. So if you tend to have that tendency with other areas of life, they can just be like, oh, brain, come on. Be kind to yourself, but just acknowledge just what your brain's doing. Brendan?
I like to make these things physical sometimes. So I have asthma, which means sometimes I can't breathe, but it's not because I'm too lazy and unmotivated to breathe. And it's not because I'm like a breathing imposter. It's because I have asthma. And so that's okay, right? Like it's not normal to have asthma. However, if you have asthma, it is normal to not be able to breathe sometimes. In the same way that if you have ADHD, it is normal to forget to do stuff. It is normal to double book yourself. It is normal to not know where you're going next, right? And married to that is like, you know, anxiety that goes hand in hand with ADHD because they're best friends. And when you've got the anxiety, it's kind of normal to ruminate, and it's kind of normal to feel like you're an imposter and maybe you're not, maybe you don't really have ADHD and those kinds of things. And so normalizing that in the context of the disorder, right? Not in the context of the grand wide universe, I think is important. And I think it's a valid strategy. And when it comes to the imposter stuff, I was at the International Conference on ADHD, the last one that happened in person. And I was at breakfast and I was talking to some people and they were talking about their coffee and how someone was like, well, I don't really drink coffee because when I have caffeine, it makes me tired. And someone else was like, yeah, I know a few people who have ADHD that get tired from caffeine. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, do I not have ADHD? Because caffeine doesn't make me tired. And like, that's how normal that is. You're just going to have these moments where your brain is going to have a weird thought and it doesn't fit, and that's okay. Just give yourself permission to have those thoughts in the same way that the world at large will give me permission to not breathe every now and then. The trick is with ADHD, a lot of it's been moralized instead of normalized. And we just have to flip that script.
And I think too, as just human beings, we love certainty. And I think for me, I think it's helpful to sort of recognize and make peace with the fact that there is no 100% like certainty on an ADHD diagnosis for any of us, right? So like, oh, so I find that helpful because what that means then, we could say that, oh, like to the best information that we have available and to the best of our knowledge, this is the thing that explains the challenges. And so we sort of let go of this idea of certainty and say, all right, this is the good enough. Like this has been a very, really well-researched disorder. A good diagnosis has a lot of statistical power on then it actually being ADHD. But, you know, people get it wrong sometimes, and get a second opinion if you want that. Whatever we call it, whatever it is, if we're seeking some kind of help, it's because we're struggling with something. So if it's not ADHD, find out what's maybe causing the struggle so you can learn how to address it. So ADHD or not, you know, it's just a starting point for where we get the help and where we seek the help and how we're learning and gaining self-awareness. And just getting the diagnosis doesn't really solve a ton of things, but it's the starting point. It's sort of like the key to the library that has all the information of and the support that's there. So, all right, we are up on time, but before we let you go, Mr. Will Curb has a moment of dad.
Why do ducks have tails?
Why do ducks have tails?
To cover their butt quacks.
Well done.
Thank you, everyone. Oh my gosh. Thank you, everybody, for coming, for asking your questions. If we did not get your question this week, we will try to get to it next month. We do this every second Tuesday of the month. We love when you join us. And Brendan, MJ, Roxie, Will, Moira, and Barb, thank you so much. And for everyone who asked a question, thank you so much. And we will catch you next time. Bye, everybody.
And Will, thanks for getting the DuckTales theme song stuck in my head.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADDA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.